Hey, greetings. Michael here. 2 weeks ago, we saw a million-man army, million plus, really, man army come down from, really, Hebron is where they met. It was Esau's seed. It was Kadim. What is it? Kadim? Kadim, is that how you say it? Rome. They were the people from Rome. I forget what that was. And then Esau, or then the East seed and Ishmael's seed, all came to Egypt in our 102nd year in Egypt to fight with Egypt and Israel's seed. Egypt put together a 400,000 man army, and Israel put together a 150-man army. Big difference. They wouldn't let us fight with them because we were fighting relatives, and we might go and fight for the relatives against Egypt. And so they kept us in the rear. And when it went bad against them, they called us forward to fight with them. And while we were fighting, they ditched us. They retreated and left us to fight a million-man army alone. 6,666.66666666 on infinity, and left us to fight. And we were so ticked, we chased them away. 150 men chased away a million men. Go figure, they ran off to Cush, wherever that is. And when we came back, we actually killed some of the Egyptians because we were so ticked. Well, they were afraid. And because of that fear, we saw last week, remember this is our 102nd year, that the king decided to put us to work, make slaves of us, but he had to do it very, very sneakily. What he did was he had all Egypt and Israel's seed work together on a project to rebuild these two towns. Here it is right here. Ramses and Gittim. Maybe Takpankas as well, to reinforce the defenses there, building walls, etc., to keep other invaders from coming at us. They were very, very much afraid. They thought if we put us to work, maybe we will be so exhausted that we can't make any more babies. That was their goal. Didn't work. After 23 years, they finally decided that we're getting stronger and they need to do something different. And it was at that time that they talked to Shiphrah and Puna, the midwives, and told them that they needed to kill the male child, the Yeladim. They didn't. And they gave an excuse to the king that the Egyptian women were not like the Hebrew women, that we gave birth to their babies. They gave birth to their babies before the midwives showed up. Well, that wasn't really the case. The midwives just decided that they were going to follow the Elohim, Elohim, and not the Elohim of the land, Pharaoh. Yehovah honored them and gave them homes. Well, like I say, that was in the 125th year. Now, also in the 125th year, we saw that the king of Edom, Ben-Hadad, died. And Samlah reigned in his place. he was going to go against Kittim. That's what Rome was. He was going to take an army against Esau. Esau's seed to go fight Zepho and the Romans. And they wouldn't go because Zepho was one of them. Remember, it's Zepho ben Eliphaz ben Esau, who was the king of Rome. They decided, well, I don't know that they even decided that, but Egypt got it in their head that, let's see if it is here. And when the Egyptians heard this matter, they increased the labor of the Israelites. Yeah, they got it in their head, and afterwards he will come fight us. So he says, and here it is, verse 5, and Pharaoh, king of Egypt, heard this thing, saying, Samlah, king of Edom, has resolved to fight Esau's or Kittim's seed. That's Rome. And afterwards he will come and fight against Egypt. Well, they never really said they would do that, but they got it in their mind, Egypt did, that they were in danger. And so they put the Israelites to work more. And they decided that they needed to, what was this? Here. Let me see. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. It was us. It was Yov from Mesopotamia. Yov from us. He was an Uzite. It was his idea to use the midwives. I apologize. But this all happened in the 125th year, 23 years after the king decided to put us to work. Remember, they withdrew themselves and we were ending up being slaves, not getting any money at all. And it was Levi's seed who never worked for the Egyptians. All right. So we kind of left off with that story last week. The story of the midwives. Now, this week, remember that was 23 years. So now, what should I say? Amram and Jochebed are going to get together. Let's start reading here. There was a man in the land of Egypt, of the seed of Levi, whose name was Amram ben Kohath, ben Levi, ben Israel, ben Jacob. Israel is Jacob. They didn't use Jacob, they used Israel. I think that's interesting. It says this man went and took a woman, namely Jochebed. Look what it says. The daughter of Levi, his father's, Kohath's, son of Levi, sister. When I read this, my mind started whirling. I wonder if your mind is starting to whirl right now. Because if Jochebed is Moses' mother, and Moses is going to bring Israel's seed out of Egypt in 80 years after he's born, and we're only in our 126th year, how does 430 years, which just about every pastor, every person who studies scriptures will tell you, we were in Egypt 430 years, don't you know? No, we weren't. Well, we were. We just have to understand what Egypt is. When we see 430 years we were in Egypt, we don't know what that means. Remember, Yehovah's bringing us into our land from Egypt. We lived in the land of Egypt for 210 years. But the 430 years goes all the way back to a promise that Yehovah gave Abram when he was 70 years old. I can show you the numbers. We'll probably see them at a later date. I'm not going to take the time to do it right now. But here we are in our 126th year that he's marrying Jochebed, the daughter of Levi. In Exodus 1, it talks about a daughter of Levi. Why does it say a daughter of Levi? I wonder if it has to be because they know they can't justify the 430 years. But if it's the daughter of Levi, where did she come and when was she born? You see how this fits together? I'll show you some stuff on it when we get to Torah. We're going to go through this first, and then I want to show you what Torah says. We're going to go through 10 verses again of Torah and 2 chapters of Yasher, talking about the same material. Torah gives an outline. Yasher fills in the blanks. It gives the rest of the story, and this is a very important story. So, father, sister, when I saw this, do I want to say? Well, let me read my note. It says she was Amram's 126-year-old aunt when she was married. I put Yowza. Moses was a miracle baby like Isaac. Well, so was Miriam. So was Aaron. This woman was, we're going to see, she's going to be 127 years old when she has Miriam, and 128 when she has Amram. Close to 133 when she has Moses. We're going to try and figure that out today as we go through this. Here, I have this on here. When I saw, here it is right here. When I saw that Jochebed was the daughter of Levi in Yasher, it made me go back to Torah to search Torah. And I found this verse in Torah. I want to share it with you now. It's from Numbers. It's this one right here. And the name of Amram's wife was Jochebed, the daughter of Levi, who was born to Levi in Egypt. She was in uterus when they came to Egypt, but she was born in Egypt. And to Amram she bore Aaron and Moses and their sister Miriam. Of course, it was Miriam, Amram, Moses was the birth order. We're going to see that now. And the woman conceived and bare a daughter. And she called her name Miriam because in those days the Egyptian had embittered the lives of Israel's seed. And she conceived again and bare a son and called his name Aaron. For in those days of her conception, Pharaoh began to spill the blood of the male children of Israel. I think this might be when the midwives were told that they had to murder the babies, murder the Yeledim, the young men. So, if this is the 126th year that they got married, Miriam's probably going to be born in the 127th year, and at best, Aaron's going to be born in the 128th year. And some things have got to happen before Moses is born. And so let's leave it off right here with the 128th year. Now, what also happened in the 125th year of, was this the 125th? We'll find out. I think it was. In those days. So yeah, we're talking about the 126th year. So in the 126th year, in those days, died Zephel. Remember, he was the king of Kittim, son of Eliphaz, ben Esau, king of Kittim, and Janius reigned in his stead. At that time, Zephel reigned over Kittim's seed for 50 years, and he died and was buried in the city of Nabna in the land of Kittim. And Jenius, one of the mighty men of Kittim's seed, reigned after him, and he reigned 50 years. And it was after the death of the king of Kittim. This is why we're telling you about this story right now. It was after the death of the king of Kittim, Zepho, that Balaam ben Beor fled from the land of Kittim, and he went and came to Egypt, to Pharaoh, king of Egypt. This is Balaam ben Beor. We're going to see that Balaam is going to have two sons, Janius and Jambri. Janius is going to have another Beor, and Beor is going to have another Balaam. That last Balaam is going to be the Balaam that we see in Numbers 24. Well, you've got to sew all of it together to find the big picture. But here is Balaam for the first time coming to Egypt. It says, Pharaoh received him with great honor, for he had heard of his wisdom. And he gave him presents and made him a counselor and aggrandized him. And Balaam dwelt in Egypt in honor with all the nobles of the king. And the nobles exalted him. Why? Because they all coveted to learn his wisdom. And in the 130th year of Israel going down to Egypt. So now we're to the 130th year. How old is Jochebed? 130 years. Pharaoh dreamed. Remember, the Israelites, as men, see visions and dreams. Non-Israelites, dare I call them Gentiles? I hate to use that word because it's such a Jewish word. Get dreams. They don't get visions. Pharaoh dreamed that he was sitting upon a kingly throne and lifted up his eyes and saw an old man standing before him. And there were scales in his hands, in the hands of the old man, such scales as are used by the merchants. And the old man took the scales and hung them before Pharaoh. And the old man took all the elders of Egypt, Egypt's elders, and all its nobles and great men, and he tied them together and put them in one scale. And he took a milk kid. A milk kid. Is this a child that is nursing? Or is this a kid goat? A goat that gives milk, a kid of a goat. I think it might be the latter. And put it into the other scale. And the kid preponderated overall. The only reason I say that is the word kid is not something that you use for a child. Not in Torah, not in Yasher. It's always going to be a child, or it's going to be Yeladim or something along those lines. And Pharaoh was astonished at this dreadful vision, why the kid should preponderate over all. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And Pharaoh rose up early in the morning and called all his servants and related to them the dream. And the men were greatly afraid. And the king said to all his wise men, interpret, I pray you, the dream which I dreamed, that I may know it. And Balaam ben Beor, remember, it's Beor the Syrian. There's going to be two Beors. I just told her that there's finally going to be a Balaam ben Beor also. But this is Beor, he's the son of Beor the Syrian, as opposed to Beor the Egyptian. I think that's why they say the Syrian, so that we can tell the difference. And Balaam ben Beor answered the king and said unto him, this means nothing else but that a great evil that will spring up against Egypt in the latter days. There's going to be a great evil that's going to spring up against Egypt, the world that we know. You know what? We were talking about Egypt was well beyond just the borderline of Egypt, because Abram was in Hebron when we were talking about that 430 years that we were in Egypt. So in a sense, as an Ezra man, son of Elohim, which I am, in Egypt. And Yehovah is going to deliver me and other men who are in covenant with him, who have left the kingdom of their birth, participated in Passover, and become his Ezra men, Israelites. Again, and he's going to bring us back to the land. So get ready, Egypt, it's about to happen again. For a son will be born to Egypt. This is his dream. This is Balaam's interpretation. For a son will be born to Israel, who will destroy all Egypt and its inhabitants, and bring forth the Israelites from Egypt with a mighty hand. Whoa, talk about dead on. But two have been born, Moses and the true shepherds. Who are going to be the true shepherds? I used to say Moses and 144,000, but I believe now that we're talking about the male child that's going to come from the earth. I'll be one of them if I'm still alive. I'll definitely be one of them if I'm dead. Because look what it says here. This is from Isaiah 66. Before she was in labor, she gave birth. Before her pain came, she delivered a male child. Who has heard such a thing? Who has seen such things? Shall the earth be made to give birth in a day? Or shall a nation be born at once? For as soon as Zion was in labor, she gave birth to her sons. This is the resurrection of the dead, of all the Ezra men from the past. And I think that's going to have their women with them as well. It's going to be an army as the sands of the sea, as the stars of heaven in number. Huge. But they are going to be the male child who is going to deliver Egypt, or deliver Israel from Egypt, who will destroy all Egypt and its inhabitants and bring forth the Israelites from Egypt with a mighty hand. Now, therefore, O king, take counsel upon this matter, that you may destroy the hope of Israel and their expectation before this evil arises against Egypt. And the king said to Balaam, and what shall we do to Israel? Surely after a certain manner did we at first counsel against them and could not prevail over them. We tried to make them our slaves. Now therefore give you also advice against them by which we may prevail over them. And Balaam answered the king, saying, send now and call thy two counselors, and we will see what their advice is upon this matter. And afterward, thy servant will speak. He didn't want to put this out first. He wanted the other two to do it. And so look at who they are. And the king sent and called his two counselors. The first one is Raul, the Midianite. He's the a prince of Midian. They always might make him the priest of Midian. I don't think he's a priest. I think he's a prince of Midian. And Job, the Uzite. He's from Uz. And they came and sat before the king. And the king said to them, behold, you have both heard the dream which I have dreamed, and the interpretation thereof. Now therefore give counsel, and know and see what is to be done with Israel's seed, whereby we may prevail over them before their evil shall spring up against us. We don't want this male child to be born. And Raul, the Midianite, answered the king and said, may the king live. May the king live forever. You know, this man has guts. He's going to tell it like it is and listen to what he says. If it seems good to the king, let him desist from the Hebrews and leave them, and let him not stretch forth his hand against them. For these are they whom Jehovah chose in days of old, and took as the lot of his inheritance from among the nations of the earth and the kings of the earth. He's still doing it, you guys. He took me from the nation of the earth to join his holy nation. He took me from the kings that I was serving to serve only him. And who is there that stretched his hand against them with impunity, of whom their God was not avenged? Surely thou knowest what happened to Abraham when Abraham went down to Egypt. Pharaoh, the former king of Egypt, saw Sarah, his woman, and took her for a woman, because Abraham said, she's my sister. For he was afraid lest the men of Egypt should slay him on account of his woman. And when the king of Egypt had taken Sarah, then Elohim smote him and his household with heavy plagues, until he restored unto Abraham his woman Sarah. Then he was healed. And Abimelech the Gerite, king of the Philistines, Elohim punished on account of Sarah, his woman, on account of Sarah, Abraham's woman, in stopping up every womb from man and beast. I don't think he stopped up the wombs. I think he shut their bottoms up. They couldn't poop. You can only go for a certain amount of time with that going on. So it affects men and women. And when Elohim came to Abimelech in a dream of night and terrified him in order that he might restore Abram Sarah, whom he had taken, and afterwards all the people of Gerar were punished on account of Sarah. And Abraham prayed to his Elohim for them, and he was entreated of him, and he healed them. And Abimelech feared all this evil that came upon him and his people, and he remembered Abraham's woman Sarah, and gave him with her many gifts. He got her and he got the gifts. He did so also to Isaac when he had driven him from Gerar. And Elohim had done wonderful things to him, that all the watercourses of Gerar were dried up, and their productive trees did not bring forth, until Abimelech of Gerar and Akuzat, one of the friends, and Pekah, the captain of the host, went to him, and they bent down and bowed down before him to the ground. And they requested him to supplicate for them, and he prayed to Jehovah for them. And Jehovah was entreated of them, and he healed them. This is all Raul that's relating this. Now it says, and Jacob, or Jacob also. It says the plain man, the Tom man. Remember, we were talking about the Tom man, one who is mature and upright, one who is whole. This is not a diss. This is a compliment. He's a Tom man. Tam, T-A-M. The Tam man was delivered through his integrity from the hand of his brother Esau, the hand of Laban the Syrian, his mother's brother, who had sought his life. Likewise, from the hands of all the kings of Canaan, who had come together against him and his sons to destroy them. And Jehovah delivered them out of their hands, and they turned upon them and smote them. For whoever stretched forth his hand, for who has ever stretched forth his hand against them with impunity? No one. Surely Pharaoh, the former, thy father's father, raised Joseph, the son of Yaakov, above all the princes of the land of Egypt, when he saw his wisdom. For through his wisdom he rescued all the inhabitants of the land from the famine. And after which he ordered Jacob and his sons to come down to Egypt in order that through their virtue the land of Egypt and the land of Goshen might be delivered from the famine. Now therefore, if it seems good in thy eyes to cease from destroying Israel's seed. Now therefore, if it seems good in thy eyes, cease from destroying Israel's seed. But if not, if it not be thy will that they shall dwell in Egypt, send them forth from here, that they may go to the land of Canaan, the land where their ancestors sojourned. Both choices, Israel lives. Cease from destroying them or let them go. And when Pharaoh heard the words of, look at what it says, when he heard the words of Joseph or Jethro, we were just talking to Raul. Raul has at least two names, and I think I remember there being three names for this man. When Pharaoh heard the words of Jethro, also Raul, he was very angry with him. So he rose up with shame from the king's presence and went to Midian, his land, and took Joseph's stick with him. Pretty interesting. The king didn't like what Raul, Jethro, had to say. It was all true. It was all verifiable. But the king didn't like it, and Jethro had to leave Egypt. Look at what he took with him. He took Joseph's stick with him. What is that? It's going to come up again later. Joseph's stick, we are going to see, is the rod of Elohim. Shem had the rod of Elohim. He gave it to, who did he give it to? Did he give it to, I want to say Isaac, but it might have been straight to Jacob. Jacob had it when he went to Haran, brought it back with him when he came back to Canaan. And I think Jacob brought it with him to Egypt and gave it to his son Joseph at that time. The rod of Elohim is held by the highest member of the highest authority in Jehovah's kingdom, kind of the spiritual authority, probably more than even the spiritual authority. You know, we were talking about the blessing. Could it have gone from Isaac? Could Shem have given it to Isaac, who then gave it to Jacob? Jacob, when firstborn son of Israel, what's his name? Starts with an R. It's worth looking up. Let's go to Jacob's seed. Reuben is who I was looking for. When Reuben slept with his father's concubine, he was the one who was in line to receive the blessing. And it was not only a spiritual blessing, but it was a kingly blessing as well. And the double portion for being the firstborn. Joseph got the double portion. But I wonder if Reuben would have gotten the whole kit and caboodle had he not sinned against his father in taking his father's concubine. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see where the and I might even say it in Yasher, what the line was of who had this rod. So we may see this later on as we talk about this particular rod. It's quite an interesting story. But here is Joseph's stick. Jethro is taking it with him. Remember, Jethro is Raul. He's going to be the daughter of, here I have it here. He's going to be the father, rather, of Zipporah. Yeah, he's the father of Zipporah, Moses' wife. All right. So that was the advice that Jethro gave Pharaoh. Jethro displeased Pharaoh and kind of got kicked out of Egypt. Well, now, Job, the Uzite, he's got to speak. Look at what happens. And the king said to Job, the Uzite, Job, the Uzite, what sayest thou, Job? And what is thy advice respecting the Hebrews? Listen to this guy. So Job said to the king, behold, all the inhabitants of the land are in thy power. Let the king do as it seems good in his eyes. Talk about not putting himself out there, kissing Pharaoh's cookies, the gutless wonder that he is. He gave no advice at all. So now it's going to come back to Balaam. And the king said unto Balaam, what dost thou say, Balaam? Speak thy word that we may hear it. Balaam said to the king. Well, Balaam knows some things. Of all the king has counseled against the Hebrews, will they be delivered? And the king will not be able to prevail over them with any counsel. So far, it sounds pretty good. For if thou thinkest to lessen them by flaming fire, thou canst not prevail over them. For surely their Elohim delivered Abram, their father, from Ur of the Chaldees. Remember, he was cast into the fiery furnace. And if thou thinkest to destroy them with a sword, surely Isaac, their father, was delivered from it. And the ram was placed in its stead. And if with hard, rigorous labor thou thinkest to lessen them, thou wilt not prevail even in this. For their father Jacob served Laban in all manner of work and prospered. Now, therefore, O king, hear my words. For this is the counsel which is counseled against them, by which thou wilt prevail over them, and from which thou shouldst not depart. If it please the king, let him order their sons, which shall be born, the Yeladim probably is what it says, their Yeladim, which will be born from this day forward to be thrown into the water. You know, I think this is interesting that they use water. Here, they tried killing him subtly. They tried to use the midwives to take him down, kill him outright. But that didn't work. So now they're going to slaughter him all outright. Listen to what happens. What did I say? Now they're moving on to a more overt approach. Kill them outright. For by this canst thou wipe away their names. From none of them wipe away their name. For none of them, nor their fathers, were tried in this manner. In other words, he's looking for something that will prevail over them that hasn't been used before. Of course, we know it's not going to work. And the king heard the words of Balaam, and the thing pleased the king and his princes. And the king did according to the word of Balaam. All this is what happened between Here it is right here. The story about Shiphrah and Puah, the midwives. There was like 8 verses about them. And then 1 verse at the end of chapter 1 was this verse right here. And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive. They actually translated it as so. Like nothing happened. It was an automatic decision. Okay, well, Shiphrah and Puah didn't work, so let's do this. But left out all the stuff about Balaam. We have no idea that Balaam was involved in this. And the king ordered a proclamation. That ended chapter 1, by the way. And the king ordered a proclamation to be issued and a law to be made throughout the land of Egypt. Every male child born to the Hebrews from this day forward shall be thrown into the water. You know, it says here, Pharaoh's charged all his people. He didn't charge all his people. Well, he did. But we got to understand that we're not talking about lady people. We're talking about men people. He charged the men of Egypt to see that every male son, every Yeladim, there was actually Ha-Yelad. Ha-Yelad. No, Ha-Ben. Every son. Kol Ha-Ben. Every son, all the sons, all sons. Every son, I think, is a good way to translate it. But notice, it's not the daughters. They're not afraid of daughters. They're afraid of men. All right. And the king ordered a proclamation to be issued. Let me close this. And the king ordered a proclamation to be issued and a law to be made throughout the land of Egypt. Every male child born to the Hebrews from this day forward shall be thrown into the water. And Pharaoh called unto all his servants, saying, go now and seek throughout the land of Goshen, where Israel's seed are, and see that every son born to the Hebrews shall be cast into the river. This time he's talking about his servants, his Evadim, again, men. But every daughter you shall let live. And when Israel's seed heard this thing which Pharaoh had commanded, to cast their male children into the river, some of the people separated from their women, and others adhered to them. Remember, this happened in the 130th year. Got to keep these numbers together. We got to remember where we're at in time right now. And from that day forward, when the time of delivery arrived for those women of Israel who had remained with their men, went to the field to bring forth there, and they returned forth, and they brought forth in the field, and their sons upon the field, and returned home, and left their sons upon the field and returned home. And Jehovah had sworn to their ancestors to multiply them. And Jehovah, who had sworn to their ancestors to multiply them, sent one of his ministering angels, which are in heaven, to wash each child in water, to anoint and swathe it, and to put into its hand 2 smooth stones, from one of which to suck milk, and from the other honey. And he caused their hair to grow to their knees, by which it might cover itself, and to comfort it, and to cleave to it through his compassion for it. And when Elohim had compassion over them, and had desired to multiply them on the face of the land, he ordered his earth, to receive them, to be preserved therein till the time of their growing up. After which the earth opened its mouth. Gee, this is kind of kind of like the earth giving forth sons. You know, it's kind of that foreshadowing, I guess, is the word I'm looking for. preserved therein till the time of their growing up, after which the earth opened its mouth and vomited them forth. And they sprouted forth from the city like the herbs of the earth and the grass of the forest. And they returned each to his family and to his father's house, and they remained with them. I put, okay. When we saw that Esau's seed in earlier chapters had seen a creature that was half man, half horse, upper half man, lower part horse, we thought, okay. But now we're seeing that come out of the dumbs right now. Is it possible? I wouldn't throw this out. I wouldn't. Especially after the verse I just read you about the earth giving birth in a day. These are all things that we have to look at. Is that a foreshadowing? I wonder. And Israel's seed's babes were upon the earth like the herb of the field through Elohim's grace to them. And when all the Egyptians saw this thing, they went forth, each to his field with his yoke of oxen and his plowshare. And they plowed it up as one plows the earth at seed time. And when they plowed, they were unable to hurt the infants of Israel's seed. So Israel's people increased and waxed exceedingly. And Pharaoh ordered his officers daily to go to Goshen to seek Israel's seed's babes. And when they had sought and found them, they took it from its mother's bosom by force and threw it into the river. But the female child they left with its mother. And thus did the Egyptians to the Israelites all the days. Well, that said, now let's go to Exodus 2, 1 through 10. This is the only part of Torah that we're going to read today, save the last verse of chapter 1, which we just now read. Here it is. Exodus 2. Whoops, wrong one. Here we are. Exodus 2. It says, a man of the house of Levi went and took, it says, it doesn't even say a woman. It doesn't use a wife. It doesn't use any of that. It says a man went and took a daughter of Levi. That's how it gets translated. As woman, it's not even there. This woman's old. Remember, she's 126 years old when this is happening. We said she had Jochebed at 127, Aaron at 128. And Moses is still at least 3 years out after they decide to throw all the boys into the river at 130. So there's going to be 3 years from there. So Moses is at best going to be, or Jochebed is at best going to be 133 years, probably more, when Moses is born. Again, this has a lot to do with how long we were in Egypt. Do I want to say any more thing about that? The next chapter we're going to read is Yasher 67, so we're not going to even read this. Let's continue. So Moses conceived and bore a son. Listen, they left out Miriam, they left off Aaron. Now they're going right to Moses in Torah. Again, outlines. So the woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was beautiful, she hid him 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, why couldn't she no longer hide him? She took an ark of bulrushes for him, dubbed it with asphalt and pitch, put the child in it, and laid it in the reeds by the river bank. Moses is going to be delivered from the water also. Remember, it's so interesting. Remember this, Balaam, he said that water would be a way to kill the seed, way to kill Israel. And Yehovah is going to deliver us from the waters. Waters are metaphorical for the world's people, the oceans, the seas, the waters. I'll give you some examples here in a second. I think I have it. And his sister, Miriam, she must be born 27, now 133. She's at least 5, maybe 6, maybe 7 years old. And his sister, no name, they don't even give her a name, stood afar off to know what would be done to him. Why did she not know what would be done? Why would it be important to her to know what would be done to him? You're going to see that in Yasher. Then Pharaoh's daughter, again no name, came down to bathe at the river. As her maidens walked by the riverside, and when she saw the ark among the reeds, she sent her maid to get it. And she opened it. She saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. So she had compassion on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." This is from the Hebrews' sons. This is how it's actually written. This is one from the Hebrews' sons, is actually what it says. Then the sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the Yeled, the male child for you?" It actually says Yeled, the male child, the lad. You could say it that way. It gives it at least a gender. And Pharaoh's daughter said, "Go." So the maiden, the Alma, the maiden went and called the child's mother, her mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. I think this is where I'm supposed to stop. I'll read one more verse. And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. So she called his name Moses, saying, "Because I drew him out of the water." Again, I think it's significant that Jehovah's people are being delivered from the waters. Remember, it said from the kings and from the people of the land is where Israel's seed came from earlier. Well, that's as much as we're going to go in Exodus right now, because we still have gobs of Yasher to go through. Another whole chapter. I want to get through this today. And it was at that time the spirit of Elohim was upon the daughter of Amram, the sister of Aaron. And she went forth and prophesied in the house, saying, "Behold, a son will be born unto us from my father and mother this time, and he will save Israel from the hands of Egypt." I read that, father and mother. When I ever talk, I always talk about my mom and dad. I never talk about my dad and mom. Why is that? Are we trained to put our mom ahead of our father? I challenge you, when you think of your mom and dad, to start thinking about your dad and mom instead. This is a little thing, but it changes your thinking. The father has the authority in the household. The mother, bone of his bone, flesh of his flesh, is he. Let's think about that. "Behold, a son will be born from us, from my father and mother this time, and he will save Israel from the hands of Egypt." And Amram heard the words of his daughter. And when Amram heard the words of his daughter, he went and took his wife back to his house because he had driven her away at that time when Pharaoh ordered every male child of the house of Jacob to be thrown into the water. Remember, we just read it, that many of the men sent their women away. This was 3 years ago. Look what it says now. So Amram took Jochebed, his woman, 3 years after he had driven her away. And he came to her, and she conceived. So if he gave the order at 130 years, and Amram sent Jochebed away for 3 years, we know that now we're in the 133rd year, and we still have to have Moses be born. And he came to her, and she conceived. And at the end of 7 months, so that's why I say we're at 33 and 7 months, earliest possible time. At the end of 7 months, Moses is a preemie. Isn't that interesting? Probably the most defenseless child, a preemie, barely able to live. Jehovah was with him. 7 months from her conception, she brought forth a son. And the whole house was filled with a great light, as the light of the sun and the moon. At the time of their shining, must have been quite a sight. And when the woman saw the child that it was good and pleasing to the sight, she hid him for 3 months in an inner room. In those days, the Egyptians conspired to destroy all the Hebrews there. And the Egyptian women went to Goshen where Israel's seed were, and they carried their young ones upon their shoulders. This is boys and girls, their babies who could not yet speak. And in those days, when Israel's women brought forth, each woman had hidden her son from before the Egyptians, that the Egyptians might not know of their bringing forth, and might not destroy them from the land. And the Egyptian women came to Goshen, and their children who could not speak were upon their shoulders. And when the Egyptian women came into the house of the Hebrew women, her babe began to cry. And when it cried, the Yeled that was in the inner room answered it. So the Egyptian women went and told it to the house of Pharaoh. And Pharaoh sent his officers to take the Yeled. I'm saying Yeled because we're talking about a male child, and slay him. Thus did the Egyptians to the Hebrew women all the days. And it was at the time, about 3 months, from Jochebed's concealment of her son, that the thing was known to Pharaoh's house. See, there's a reason why it says in Torah that she had to move her son. Why? Because it was known. But it doesn't tell you that in Torah. What does it say here? Yeah, here's what it says. So the woman conceived and bore a son, and she went and she saw that he was a beautiful child. She hid him for 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, why couldn't she any longer hide him? Because it was known. She took an ark of bulrushes with him, dubbed it with asphalt and pitch, and put the Yeled in it, and laid him in the reeds by the river. Yeah, that's what we're talking about right now. It was known in Pharaoh's house. And the woman hastened to take away her son before the officers came. And she took for him an ark of bulrushes and daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein. And she laid it in the flags by the river's brink. And his sister stood afar off to know what would be done to him. Why? And what would become of her words? See, she prophesied. She knows that he's going to be the one that delivers Israel. So she's got a special interest in this. The Torah doesn't tell us that. And Elohim sent forth at that time a terrible heat in the land of Egypt, which burned up the flesh of the men of man like the sun in its circuit, and greatly oppressed the Egyptians. And all the Egyptians went down to bathe in the river on account of the consuming heat, which burned up their flesh. And Bathia, she's got a name now, the daughter of Pharaoh, went also to bathe in the river, owing to the consuming heat. And her maidens walked by the river's side, and all the women of Egypt as well. Everybody was there. And Bathia lifted up her eyes to the river, and she saw the ark upon the water, and sent her maid to fetch it. And she opened it and saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him, and she said, this is one of the Hebrews' children, Yeladim. One of the Hebrews, Yeladim. And all the women of Egypt walked on the riverside, desired to give him suck, but he would not suck. For this thing was from Yehovah, in order to restore him to his mother's breast. Yehovah cares. And Miriam, his sister, was at that time amongst the Egyptian women at the riverside. And she saw this thing, and she said to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and fetch a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the Yeled for thee? You know, this is so interesting. What do I have here? That's just the verse from we just read it. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. And the young woman went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to Jochebed, take this child away. She's going to take him back home. Isn't that great? Take this child away and suckle it for me, and I will pay thee thy wages, 2 bits of silver daily. And the woman took the child and nursed it. This is so neat. Look at this. Torah doesn't tell us about the silver at all, but she says you're going to pay him. But I think it's neat because this is one of the ways that Jehovah provided for Amram's household, since he did not work for Pharaoh. Pharaoh. Since she did not work for Pharaoh. Remember, the Levites didn't work. They weren't part of that enforced servitude that was on Israel. So Jehovah helped to provide for Amram's household. And at the end of 2 years, when the child grew up, they brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he was unto her as a son. And she called his name Moses, because I drew him out of the waters. That's what it said in Torah. But now it goes on. And Amram, his father, called him Kabar, for he said, it was for him that I associated with his woman, whom he had turned away. He brought her back. And Jochebed, his mother, called his name Yakutiel, because she said, I have hoped for him to the Almighty, and God restored him to me. Yeah, she put him into the water, hoping that Yahweh would take care of him, and Elohim restored Moses to her. Miriam, his sister, called him Yered, for she descended after him to the river to know what his end would be. Aaron, his brother, called him Avi Zanuk, saying, my father left my mother and returned her on his account. Kohath, the father of Amram, son of Levi, called his name Abigdor, because on his account did Elohim repair the breach of the house of Jacob, and they could no longer throw their male sons into the water. Did the water issue stop after this? I don't know. Their nurse called him Avi Soko, saying, in the tabernacle was he hidden for 3 months. In his tabernacle was he hidden for 3 months on account of Ham's seed. That inner room, they must have called the tabernacle. I'm not sure what that is, but Ham's seed, we know Ham's seed. That's what Egypt is. And all Israel called his name Shammaiah, son Shammaiah ben Nathanael. For they said, in his days has Elohim heard their cries and rescued them from their oppressors. So they have big hopes. They know about the prophecy that Miriam gave, and now we have hopes for the future. We're not even close to, there's still several chapters that we have to cover in Yasher before we can get back to Torah. And Moses was in Pharaoh's house and was on Tabbathia, Pharaoh's daughter, a son. And Moses grew up among the king's sons. I put a note in here. Bathia is in Pharaoh's, Malal's, the king's daughter. And his sons are the boys that Moses is going to grow up with. And among them could be the son that Moses will tell to let Israel go. That's the same advice that his father, Malal, in this chapter before this, received from Jethro, Reuel, the Midianite, 80 years before. Let them go. Well, next week, we're going to continue our story. I hope you're liking this. I think it's really fascinating to see how this all fits together. There's reasons why Torah says certain things, but we don't know what it is until we read Yasher. Well, I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. I really love the book of Yasher. Thank you for joining me. We'll see you next time.